I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today we're here with Aileen Prak. Aileen, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Jason. I'm really excited to share my story and to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to hearing that. Aileen is a real estate investor and co-founder of Bonavest Capital. She also has her own podcast, the How Did They Do It Real Estate podcast. But I'd love it if you could go ahead and sort of tell us, your story, your background, and all that you've, sort of done and working towards, and then we'll break it down into pieces after that.
Awesome. Sure. So I'll share a little bit about where I come from. And it really starts with my family and my parents. They came from a country where they were escaping like a mass genocide from a country that was persecuting a lot of people who are doing things differently, who are different from them, and they wanted everybody to be the same. And so, over 4 years, they endured these hardships. And, it was estimated to be about I think 2 million people overall had been killed during this time. And so it was a really difficult time for my family. They lost a lot of family in the process as well as a lot of people during that time. And so, they struggled so much. And eventually, after this whole situation had ended, they decided to flee a country where basically they saw no more future. So they went to refugee camps. And in those camps, they had options of going to different countries to find a better place for themselves. So one of the options that they heard about was the United States. And so a lot of people in the camps had told them, the United States is a place of opportunity. It's a place where they can grow, and it's a place that they can create a new future for themselves. And that really resonated with them. And so that's kind of how they ended up in the United States. Um, and so they basically came to the United States without any money, without any connections, and, no basic understanding of the English language. And it was a really difficult time. They struggled so hard. They worked so many hours, and they had to overcome so many different obstacles, but in the end, they really persevered. And, when me and my sister were born in this country, it was that drive, that passion that they've had and the struggles that kind of resonated with us and what they've, I guess, transferred it to us. And, they always told us, we have so many great opportunities since we were born in this country. We have so many resources at our fingertips, so many opportunities that were open up for us that they didn't have when they first came to this country. And so, if you put in a lot of hard work, if you study hard, get your education, and then just really put the effort in, eventually you'll succeed. And so that's what I did. I basically went to college, studied hard, got my MBA, got a really good job, and really created a solid foundation for myself. And over the years, I saw my parents, they start to invest in real estate. And it was the first time where I was introduced to the concept of passive income. But, when you're a little bit younger, you don't really resonate, and you don't really think about this, and it doesn't really click with you. And so I was introduced to it, but I didn't really fully grasp that concept. And it wasn't really until I think about 2018 when I first became a mom for the first time. I had my son, he was born in 2018. And at that moment when he was born and spending those time with him is when I actually fully understand and really realize, how important time is and what you need to be able to do with time. And that really really hit home for me. And so, after he was born, I took off 3 months for maternity leave, and I spent every day with him, every waking hour with him, just being in his presence and seeing him and just loving that feeling. And I remember after those 3 months had ended, I had to go back to work. My maternity leave was over, and I had to make that really important decision of where to put my son. I had to, we didn't have much of an option to do anything else because we both had to work. We had to trade our time for money. And so we put him into daycare. And so it was a really difficult decision because, you're entrusting this like little person who has no sense of anything in the world, and you're entrusting them to a stranger, and you're really just entrusting his well-being and his safety to somebody you don't really know. But we had to, we did a lot of vetting, and we finally decided on a place that we felt like comfortable enough. And so I remember after 2 months of him being in daycare, I get a call at work saying, "Hey, your son, he's sick. He has a fever. You need to come pick him up right now." And me and my husband, we both work very, very far from home. And I had to van pool also. So I commuted with other coworkers in the area because of my the distance that I worked from home. And so there was no immediate way for me to get to my son and pick him up like at that moment. And for my husband, he worked very far as well. And so just to get to the daycare to pick him up, it would take him almost about like an hour and a half just to get to him. And I remember at that moment, as a parent, especially a first time parent, I felt like a failure to my son because it was so difficult to not be able to be there, especially when he needed you. And so at that moment, we were calling everybody, and luckily my parents kind of worked a little bit close by, so they were able to pick him up for us and take him home. But it wasn't that moment when I realized there had to be a better way to do this. There had to be a better way where I didn't have to choose whether or not I had to spend some time with my son or if I had to trade my time for money. And that's when I started to look into different ways of trying to find a better way, some other better way. And I just kept coming back to real estate. And then finally that light bulb went off, and it was like, real estate is actually a really great way to build wealth, to be able to create passive income. And that's when I realized the power of passive income and what it could potentially do for us and our family. And then I came across multifamily syndications, and that concept of being able to achieve something much bigger by doing these group investments and creating passive income for yourself, and then eventually getting to a place where you're able to, have that freedom of choice of where you want to spend your time, and having that constant solid factor that you have income coming from somewhere else, and yet you're not having to trade your time for money anymore, was a huge revelation for us. And that's kind of how we got started in multifamily syndications and kind of where we are today.
Yeah. I mean, that story resonates so much with me in, sort of similar, just when my son was born. It's just that, it's funny because, we're supposed to be taking care of them. We're supposed to be teaching them. We're supposed to be, providing for them. And all of a sudden it's I feel like when they give you that realization that you had and that I've had, it's almost like they're actually teaching us something, and they're teaching us, sort of the importance of time, right? It's the importance of time for ourselves to spend with family, but also the other thing that struck me about it is the importance of, when you talk about, sort of the passive income and building these multiple income streams. Well, what if we start it for them now, right? Mm-hmm. We started later in life. If we start it for them at this age, and not only do we have something sort of running for them, but we start their education, their lives can be so much better, sort of going forward. It's kind of mind-blowing when you start to look at the sort of just the math behind it, the time that they have available and stuff like that. So it's your story really definitely hits home. I think probably for myself, but and for any other parents listening, it's a big thing. So what steps did you take when you had that light bulb moment and you decided, okay, we're going to get into real estate investing and syndication? So what next steps did you guys take to kind of put that into action?
Sure. So, when we first learned about it, one of the biggest things in our lives and that we were taught by our parents was you need to get educated, because, education is such a huge, important factor. And you can lose everything in life, but nobody can ever take away your education. And so if you have a really good, a strong foundation, you're able to leverage that, and then do whatever you need to do from there. So that's what we did. We basically educated ourselves as much as possible. We listened to great podcasts like one that you're putting together. We're learning from experts in the field. We were networking with a lot of people. We were reading a lot of books, a lot of different books to kind of understand this space and understand, like, especially multifamily syndications, we're surrounded by people who, have never been introduced to this concept before. It's not something that's very commonly spoken about, and not a lot of people know about it. And so, we had to reach out to a lot of different people in order to understand, like, what is this? And is it too good to be true? Like, what does all this entail? And so that's kind of like the first step, is we had to get ourselves educated and really understand, like, the ins and outs of this thing called multifamily syndications.
Yeah. Education certainly comes first. And then tell me if you agree, but I think the next thing that comes, for me anyway, was the mindset shift, right? So you educate yourself. You just said, is this too good to be true? When you start hearing about it, I was like, this can't be like a possible thing. Why doesn't everybody do this, right? And there's reasons why everybody doesn't do it, and we can go down that road if we want. But yeah, it's I think you have to at least figure out that it's something that you can wrap your own head around. And I think, you have your MBA, so you're already a highly educated, intelligent person. It's the concepts aren't super challenging, but it is maybe a different world potentially than what you've come from in the past, in terms of your network, your education past, and things like that. And that's what it's been for me too. So so you got educated, and then what came next?
Yes, so we got educated, and then after then, we did a lot of networking, and we did a lot of like what you said, it was a huge mindset shift after we had that education, because, you can read all the books that you want and everything like that, but if your mind doesn't really shift into the possibilities and what's really out there, it's really hard to take action.
Yeah.
And so once we met with people and had those conversations and really understood, like, what this concept is, and then our mindset started to shift a little bit, and we're like, oh, okay, it is possible. Other people are doing this too. It's not something that was just created like the other day. It's something that's been around for so long, but we've just never heard about it. A lot of people have been using this vehicle for a long time, but it's, like what we're just talking about, it's not widely common knowledge. And so from there, after we started doing some networking and finding out, like, what this is and having conversations with other people, the next step was, like, to actually take action. So we did a lot of vetting with different sponsors, and because, the best way to kind of learn also, in our opinions, is kind of dip a toe in and try to see what it's about, because we can read everything, but if we don't take action, if we never really, like, take that leap, then we're always going to be stuck in a place that, we're never giving it a chance or giving it an opportunity. So it's like, okay, we found some people that we felt like we trusted, that we could trust our money with, to be good stewards of our capital. And so we're like, okay, let's just test the waters out. Let's do this first investment and see how it goes. And then from there, it was like, oh, wow, this does really work. This concept, this model, it does really work. And then from there, we started to look at other investment opportunities, and things just started snowballing from there.
Yeah, it's funny how, sort of, I think similar. I did this, so I was like, I'll invest with someone else and see what the process is and things like that. So yeah, I think you have to eventually do something. You can read all the books, you can listen to all the podcasts, but eventually you have to take action and actually get in there and do something. And I think that you brought up a really good point, in that you had to, so you vetted several sponsors and to try and figure out, sort of who you trusted and who you wanted to work with. So how did you go about that process?
So there's, like, a couple of things that we asked ourselves, as we were doing our research and everything like that. There was, like, several different factors. And then, like, for the sponsors itself, we had to really, you really have to trust your gut at the same time, and have those conversations with them. And it wasn't just like a one-off conversation, and we're like, okay, let's jump into this. I want to trust, $25,000-$50,000 with you. I barely even know you. I haven't even met you before. And so it was like, after a span of several conversations, and then learning with the sponsor, and then just really understanding where they are and who they are as a person, and then trying to figure out whether or not their goals and their vision and values align with yours. Because if it doesn't, it's really difficult to, reach a common goal together, whether it be financially or whatever like that. Is if you guys are not on the same page, then it's really hard. And so that's what we did, is like vet the sponsor really well, make sure we trust them. The three things that we like to say is like, you got to know, like, and trust the sponsor that you're vetting and you're investing with. And that's what we did, and really just trusted our gut and just did a lot of that research with the person.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully that has worked out well for you.
Yes, it did.
Good.
Definitely.
Good. Where's your portfolio at this point? What have you got, and where are you headed?
Sure. So from a passive investing standpoint, we've invested across a couple of different states. We've invested in Florida and in like Colorado. So far, passively, we've invested over like $650 from passive side of things. And then as we are having these conversations and like really loving the multifamily syndication space, we decided it started to become more of a passion for us. And so that's how we started to decide to turn over to be more of the sponsors, and then from the operations side of things, and wanting to create the same values that our sponsors were giving to us and providing those same opportunities to our network. And so we're looking in different markets like in Vegas and in the Carolinas, places where their population is growing. People are having a lot of job growth and everything like that, so different metrics. So that's kind of like where we are at in our
Okay.
careers.
Yeah, doing market research to pick out where you want to do your own, sort of set up your own syndications makes
Yes.
total sense. I mean, that's great. I know you have your own podcast. Do you want to sort of talk about what I know why I started, and I know sort of some of the benefits too, but what was your thinking in that? I know you do it with your husband. So what's kind of the I guess meaning and goal with your podcast? Outreach obviously is part of it, but yeah, tell us about yours.
Yeah. So for us, the biggest education that we got was through podcasts. And so we found it to be such a really powerful vehicle to learn and to really understand the space and get to know like the people, other people's stories. And that's how we found was the most impactful, was like learning from other people's stories. And so we were having a lot of conversations with other people as well. And so, we kind of put those two types of things together. It's like, well, we're already having these conversations with other people. We learn so much from these podcasts and from people sharing their stories. So we can start a podcast ourselves too. But again, it went back to a lot of that mindset shift. And we kind of were talking about this a little bit earlier too. It was very difficult when we first started to get into that mindset shift, to kind of put yourself out there and to start a podcast and just putting yourself out there was just the biggest, scariest part of the whole entire process, I think. But yeah, it went back to that whole mindset shift on wanting to get outside of your normal comfort zone and then see where it can go, because that has been the biggest thing for us. Is once we pushed ourselves a little bit and got a little bit outside our comfort zone, doors started to open up. We started to see more things happening, and it's just been like an amazing journey so far.
Yeah, it's fascinating how, I mean, I completely understand that sort of comfort, with all the mindset shift. It's, first it's getting comfortable with just maybe a different industry than you're familiar with. And then it's getting comfortable with maybe the numbers that you are bigger than you might have previously been familiar with. And then, in starting the podcast, it's just seems like it's a series of almost spots of feeling discomfort, and then actively going towards that discomfort in the sense to kind of get rid of it, right? So you're like, okay, this seems hard, but this is also what I need to do to get where I want to go. And so it's just kind of the drive and the sort of unwillingness to quit. So that's great. Well, let me ask you kind of some of my standard podcast group of questions. The name of the podcast is Know Your Why. So I was wondering if you could maybe tell us your why and what drives you. And I know we've talked a little bit about it, but what kind of pushes you to achieve?
Yeah. So my biggest why was, the main turning point for why we started on this road to try to create passive income for ourselves is because of my family. And we realize how precious and how important time is for ourselves. And so, we're looking for different vehicles in order to be able to create that time for us, to be able to spend it where we want to spend it. And so, we're all given such a limited number of hours in the day, and it depends on how you want to spend it. And so we want to be able to choose and have that option of where we want to spend that time. And for us, it's with our family, it's with the people we love and everything like that. And so that has been our biggest driver, is wanting to make enough and create enough passive income for ourselves that we now have that choice to spend it where we want to. It's that freedom of time and freedom of choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you still at your W-2 job at this point?
Yes, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but we are on that path to wanting to create it. And, the path before, like we were starting on this journey, was very cloudy, and you don't really know what the next steps are. And not everybody knows what it is either. But as you continue to take those consistent daily actions, the path starts to get more and more clear. And so now, we see a more clear path on how to get there. And we know, this path is going to work and we're going to get there eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's just, at first it seems like maybe you're not going anywhere. You're kind of spinning your wheels, but then a few pieces fall into place, and then it just kind of almost like it snowballs from there. And then you can see, okay, this really can be, this really can be what they say it can be. And so it gets even more exciting. Well, tell us something about yourself that maybe people don't know about you, a hobby, a special skill, something that's sort of not common knowledge. And this may be hard for you if you've got your own podcast, but if there's something that you don't mind sharing, that's a little bit less common knowledge.
Sure. I guess the first thing that pops into my mind is I really like trying new foods. And so whenever we go to countries and we go to traveling and everything like that, I choose a country based off of what kind of food I can get there. And so I would put together a list of all the different food tours and like the different types of foods that we can try and everything like that. And then if it meets like the criteria, then it's like, okay, we got to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty good way to pick where to go for vacation, on how good you're going to eat. So I think that makes total sense. How would you like people to reach out to you? But we'll put everything in the show notes too, but sort of what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Sure. So the best way is probably, we have our website, bonavestcapital.com. And if they're interested also, we have a due diligence checklist for passive investors. So they can go ahead and download that as well as a resource for them. It provides some questions and everything like that we kind of use to vet sponsors when we were starting our passive investing journey as well. So that's just bonavestcapital.com/checklist.
Okay, awesome. And we'll get that in the show notes too. Well, what would you say to someone kind of maybe, I don't know, a year ago, 6 months ago, in similar shoes as yourselves? What advice would you put out there to someone that's trying to, kind of emulate what you're doing?
It would be, don't give up. There's a lot of times where things aren't progressing as you would expect it to be, and there's going to be lulls and like pauses to your journey. Sometimes you're not seeing the traction and the results that you want to see, but you can get really disheartened by that. But it's really important to not just give up, because eventually, if you continue to do those consistent daily actions, there's no way that you're going to not reach your goal at the end. It's only when you give up is when you're not going to make it. And that's on you, and so just keep pushing and just keep consistently taking action every day, and then you'll reach your goals. You'll eventually get there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great and important advice, because I think this real estate's not a sprint. It's definitely, you can use whatever whatever analogy you want to use. Is not a sprint, it's a marathon, that kind of thing. But it's true. You're not going to make progress every single day. You're going to have, sort of a couple steps forward, maybe a couple steps back. It's not easy to get there. You're not going to get rich overnight. And I guess I would say, even if your goal is just to get rich, that's not enough of a why. It's not enough of a motivator. You have to have another reason. Like for us, it's being able to spend time with our kids. So it's extremely important to know why you're doing it, and what, sort of what's going to get you there. And then once you decide, just don't give up on it. So I love that. All right. Well, I think that that's about it. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And we'll, like I said, we'll have all of your contact information in the show notes. But thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason.